Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. So I am here once again to give you guys some pity pool pick recommendations, or more officially known as Fortune's Favor. These are the variants I recommended last time. I stand by my picks and would still recommend them, but I do want to quickly talk about Starshine since she got a rework after I made my previous Fortune's Favor video. So let's check out Starshine's new ability, Butterfly Effect. Gain a random buff for 12 seconds every 4 seconds, also gain 10% star power for each buff gained by either fighter while not in star power mode. Remove all debuffs and gain immunity for 10 seconds, and permanent precision when activating star power mode at full meter. Permanent precision is removed when an opponent is defeated. So Starshine is definitely better than she used to be, since her precision is gained by using star power at full meter, and she gains star power meter whenever she gets a buff. It's actually pretty easy to get permanent precision quickly, especially if you pair her up with somebody that can provide her with buffs. And even though Starshine loses this permanent precision whenever the enemy is defeated, if you deactivate star power right after activating it, your star power meter is still going to be close to being full, so you'll be able to fill it up extremely easily before you get to your next opponent, and therefore you're going to be able to activate it and gain permanent precision all over again. Likewise, activating star power at full meter allows you to remove all of your own debuffs and gain immunity, which is super helpful. Now, for those of you that don't know, precision makes it so your next hit is guaranteed to be a critical hit, and that hit is not going to trigger enemy signature abilities. So if you're fighting someone like Deathwish, defeating her with a precision hit will not trigger her ability to revive herself or her teammates. So yeah, I definitely recommend her. But let's go ahead and move on to my other recommendations, starting with my diamond picks. Alright, so I'm going to start off with Dark Lord Eliza. Alright, so let's check out Dark Lord Eliza's ability. Dark Ritual. Eliza starts the match with permanent fatigue. The first time an opponent is defeated while Eliza is alive, fatigue is removed. She gains 100% health, and she permanently gains increased crit rate and crit damage by 50%. Critical hits inflict Deathmark, Quietus, or Bleed, and grant Enrage for 15 seconds each. Now, Eliza's not my favorite character, partially because I'm terrible with her, but what I lack in skill is made up for by Dark Lord Eliza's crazy damage output. So like her ability said, after you defeat her first opponent, that's when her ability really kicks in, and her crit rate and crit damage get boosted, and her attacks start to hit insanely hard. On top of that, her critical hits grant her Enrage, further increasing her damage output. She can also inflict Bleed, Quietus, or Deathmark. Bleed makes it so the enemy's health is slowly draining over time, while Quietus nullifies the effects of Blessing and Final Stand, as well as the enemy's resistance, and Deathmark makes it so the enemy takes more damage from critical hits, as well as taking more damage from blocked hits. So all of that combined makes Dark Lord Eliza a damage-dealing machine. Eliza also has a move called Chaos Banish, which removes the enemy buffs upon hitting them, even if they block it, which again just further makes Dark Lord Eliza so amazing. Now, she does start off with Fatigue. So Fatigue makes it so your special move and tag-in cooldowns recharge at half speed, which is a bit annoying, but it goes away once you defeat your first opponent. Fatigue also has a chance to stun you whenever it expires, but because Dark Lord Eliza's Fatigue is permanent, that's never going to happen. So really the only thing you're going to have to deal with as far as Fatigue is concerned is the special move and tag-in slower recharge speed. And of course, Dark Lord Eliza gets all her health back after she defeats her first opponent, which is pretty awesome, though be warned, there is a debuff called Inverse Polarity, which makes it so whenever you would gain health, instead you actually lose health, and yeah, this does not have a great interaction with Dark Lord Eliza, unfortunately. Also, just to quickly touch on it, Eliza's Prestige ability, once activated, makes it so while in segment mode, your non-blockbuster hits have a chance to remove the enemy buff, as well as restore 5% of Eliza's health. So if you do manage to unlock Dark Lord Eliza's Prestige ability, that's a nice extra bonus that you have there. So yeah, Dark Lord Eliza is awesome. She is a damage-dealing machine, and honestly, I like to use her in prize fights a lot, just because she can take down the enemy really quickly and make it go by a lot faster. Plus, she's actually pretty decent in No Mercy, since her damage is insane, and it kind of outpaces the enemy's regen that they get from the match modifiers. So yeah, with that being said, Dark Lord Eliza is easily my favorite Eliza, and I highly recommend her. Next, we have Xbot Robo Fortune. Alright, so Xbot's ability, Headshot. Gain precision and inflict Deathmark after 1 second while far away from the opponent. Also gain barrier and heal for 5% health. So I think her ability is pretty self-explanatory, especially since I already discussed precision earlier, but I will say normally when it comes to precision, whenever you actually hit with a precision hit, you lose a stack of precision. So when it came to Starshine, since she gave herself permanent precision, the only way she would lose it is if she defeated her opponent, whereas when it comes to Xbot, she will lose precision each time she hits the enemy with a precision hit. But with that being said, Xbot is pretty awesome because, like her ability said, as long as she's far away from her opponent, she's going to be gaining stacks of precision and stacks of barrier, as well as restoring her own health. And Robo-Fortunes have a few projectile moves, one of which works really well with Xbot, that move being Theonite Beam. So Theonite Beam is a one-hit move that upon hitting the enemy disables tag-ins, special moves, or blockbusters. And it also inflicts armor break if the opponent blocks the hit. Armor break, by the way, increases the damage the enemy takes by 20%. The other debuffs kind of speak for themselves. But anyways, since this is a one-hit move, it pairs really well with Xbot's precision. Since precision stacks get removed per hit, it's better to use moves with fewer hits. And in the case of Theonite Beam, which only hits one time, it works extremely well with precision. And of course, it is a projectile, so you can just keep your distance and spam Theonite Beam at the enemy. And even if they do manage to block the hit, Deathmark is going to increase the damage that they take from those blocked hits. It'll also give you an opportunity to gain even more stacks of precision, since blocked hits cannot be crits. So that way when you do actually manage to hit with the Theonite Beam, it's going to do an insane amount of damage. I will say, if you do use Xbot, it is way better to pair her up with Harlequin Cerebella, and the reason for that is because Harlequin boosts the damage that your special moves deal, and it reduces the cooldown for your special moves as well. So she makes it a lot easier to spam Theonite Beam. Her ability also gives her a bit of a defensive quality as well, since she can give herself barrier and he heals herself, which is of course pretty awesome. And Robo-Fortune has a really helpful marquee ability that pairs up really well with Xbot, and that is Ping Check, which makes it so she gains Enrage whenever she's far away from the opponent. Enrage, of course, will increase the damage that she deals, which is pretty awesome. And finally, there's Robo-Fortune's prestige ability, Geiger Counter, which upon activation will grant Robo-Fortune 5 stacks of precision. It also grants her damage reflection, which is dependent on the level of the ability, as well as the number of buffs you or your opponent have. The damage reflection is more useful on a defensive variant type, but it's actually pretty nice with Xbot because she gives herself barrier and healing. So if you're really close to taking down an opponent, but they manage to get you in some kind of combo, there's a chance that counter will actually take them out before they can finish you off. And of course, the 5 stacks of precision are really awesome, especially for somebody like Xbot. But yeah, Xbot is really fun to play. Of course, if you're gonna use her, definitely pair her up with Harlequin Cerebella, since she's gonna make it so you can really just spam Theonite Beam over and over and over again. And also be sure to equip Theonite Beam, because without it, I don't think Xbot is quite as good. Alright, next we have Dealbreaker Peacock. Alright, Dealbreaker's ability, Drawing Dead. Grants immunity, haste, or enrage for 15 seconds when either fighter uses a blockbuster. Also inflict guard break and 2 random debuffs for 10 seconds each. 50% chance to grant unflinching, regen, or enrage for 15 seconds when a buff or debuff on the opponent expires. So because of Dealbreaker's ability to inflict guard break as well as 2 random debuffs, it actually becomes really easy to spam blockbusters on the enemy and actually have them hit the enemy. And the reason for this is because of guard break. So what guard break does is it makes it so while the enemy has a stack of guard break, which by the way, it stacks up to 5 times, their blocks have a chance to fail. So what this means is if the enemy has guard break and you're attacking the enemy and they block your hits, there's a chance that one of your attacks will just break through their guard and actually hit them, making it so the rest of your combo can actually go through. And multi-hit moves can really take advantage of this, so using Peacock's blockbuster Argus Agony, not only will you be able to inflict guard break on the enemy, but you'll probably break through the enemy's guard incredibly easily. Personally, what I like to do is use Impending Doom and then Argus Agony to inflict 2 stacks of guard break on the enemy, as well as a bunch of other random debuffs, and just destroy the enemy with those blockbusters. Since Impending Doom also has a chance to stun the enemy, if you can actually stun them, you can get a quick combo in to fill up your blockbuster meter and do the whole process over again. Dealbreaker also gains immunity, haste, or enrage whenever she or the enemy uses a blockbuster. Immunity makes it so you can no longer be inflicted with debuffs. Haste makes it so your meter gain is maxed out, meaning you'll be able to get blockbusters a lot faster. And Enrage, of course, increases the damage that you deal. All of these being extremely useful buffs. She also has a chance to gain Unflinching, Regen, or Enrage whenever a buff or debuff on the opponent expires. I already said what Enrage does, but Unflinching makes it so you cannot be staggered by attacks. I feel like Unflinching is a bit hard to explain, but basically when I say staggering, I mean typically whenever you hit the opponent or whenever the opponent hits you, their combo can just keep going until you get knocked down or can burst or whatever, and there's nothing you can really do about it just because that's how video games typically work, especially fighting games. But with Unflinching, Your character will not react to getting hit, and therefore you can just attack the enemy while they're attacking you. So that, of course, is an awesome buff. Now, regen makes it so your health is going to restore slowly over time, and enrage, of course, increases the damage that you deal. Now, these buffs aren't guaranteed to happen, but when they do happen, it's pretty awesome. Plus, since the enemy is going to be hit with a bunch of debuffs from your blockbusters, there's a pretty good chance that it actually is going to happen. I'm going to go ahead and skip talking about Peacock's Marquee ability or Prestige ability, mostly because her ability is tied to her blockbuster use, and also because I personally never tag out or tag in, so I don't really have much to say about that. But yeah, Dealbreaker is a really fun character to play. I love using her just because her ability is so much fun. Though if I'm being real, I don't know if she's the most useful character out there, but I think if you do get her and you like Peacock, I think you would enjoy playing as her. And if you're like me and you get kind of annoyed whenever you use the projectile and the enemy just blocks it, I think you'll really like Dealbreaker since she inflicts guard break on the enemy. So she makes it really easy for your attacks to actually connect even if they do block. Next, we have Reigning Champ Umbrella. Alright, so Reigning Champ's ability, Battle Bond. While Umbrella is alive, the active fighter gains 1 stack of Blessing and Inflincing for 15 seconds every 10 combo hits. While Umbrella is alive, increase all teammates' attack by 4% of the fighter's current health for each stack of Blessing currently on the fighter. Reigning Champ is a great support character since she can give your active fighter unflinching as well as stacks of Blessing. I already told you guys what unflinching does, so let's talk about Blessing. So with Blessing, whenever you would die while you have a stack of Blessing, you revive and you gain some of your health back, and this health is increased for each stack of Blessing that you have. So this is of course very useful for survivability reasons, and unflinching of course makes it so you can play more aggressively. And she also boosts the damage that you deal for each stack of Blessing that you have, but her damage boosting is also dependent on the amount of HP that you have, so the more health that you have, the more damage that you're going to deal. The reason I typically use Reigning Champ is honestly because of her unflinching. That unflinching is so useful because it's just such a useful buff. Plus, it's really easy to get since all you have to do is get a combo of 10 hits, which most characters in this game can pull off very easily, so yeah, Reigning Champ is a great support. It also helps that her ability is pretty universal in that it can help basically anybody, so you can kind of throw her in any team formation. You can also technically use her on her own as well because her ability affects herself, so there's that too. But if you want to just stick with using her as a support, you don't actually have to level her up all that much and really just have to unlock the skill notes for her signature ability. Now, because Reigning Champ is a support character and I can't really imagine that many people will use her on her own, I'm not going to bother talking about her Marquee ability or her Prestige abilities, so yeah. Alright, for my final diamond pick, we have Mad Malice Marie. Alright, so Mad Malice's ability, Off with Their Heads. While Marie is alive, her teammates' critical hits have a 25% chance to grant Enrage for 15 seconds. Marie gains permanent Enrage for every 30% health lost by any teammate or opponent. Gain permanent precision while benefiting from 5 stacks of this Enrage. I don't think I need to explain why Mad Malice is so good since I've kind of already have explained it with previous characters, but her damage is absolutely insane once you manage to get that permanent precision and 5 stacks of Enrage. Plus, unlike Starshine Annie, whose permanent precision goes away once you defeat an opponent, Mad Malice's permanent precision is going to stick around no matter what, so unless she dies, you're pretty much good to go. Another awesome thing about Mad Malice is that she also grants her teammates a chance to get Enrage whenever they get a critical hit, so you can also use her as an offensive support, and if you want to have somebody that can also fight the enemy as well as provide support, then Mad Malice is definitely your way to go. Plus, because she's a Marie, she has the ability to revive your allies as well as destroy enemy corpses. Because Mad Malice's damage is so high on its own, I don't think I really even need to mention her Marquee ability or Prestige ability because I don't think it really contributes much to her own abilities. So yeah, I definitely recommend Mad Malice because like I said, she hits insanely hard and she's just awesome. Alright, now let's go ahead and move on to my gold picks. So for my first gold pick, we have Wave Warrior Annie. So Wave Warrior Annie's ability, Fluid Dynamics. Every 15th combo hit, transfer up to 2 opponent buffs to self and reduce opponent blockbuster meter by 25%. While Annie has living teammates, gaining a buff permanently increases damage by 10% and heals all teammates for 5% health. Now Wave Warrior is a buff stealer, and buff stealers are awesome because, like their name suggests, they can take buffs from the enemy, which can make your life so much easier depending on who you're fighting. She also gives herself a damage boost whenever she gets a buff, so she'll be getting stronger periodically throughout the match. She reduces the opponent's blockbuster meter as well, so because of that, you shouldn't have to worry about the enemy throwing a blockbuster at you and just destroying you. And of course, she can also heal her teammates whenever she gets a buff as well, which is pretty handy. Do keep in mind though that she does have to have living teammates for her damage boost and her healing to work. But yeah, if you don't already have somebody that can remove buffs from the enemy or steal buffs, then I definitely recommend Wave Warrior because frankly, her ability is just really good. And frankly, her ability isn't even that difficult to activate since Annie already has a couple of blockbusters that hit quite a few times, that being Gravity Slingshot and Seigen Beam, so definitely recommend her. Alright, next we have Psykid. Psykid's ability, Mind Over Matter. When hitting an attacking opponent, gain Deadeye and inflict inverse polarity for 15 seconds each. 100% chance to reset the timers of all Umbrella's buffs and all opponent debuffs except Stun and Doom when the opponent bounces off a wall. So Psykid is awesome since she can inflict inverse polarity, which is honestly one of my favorite debuffs, but she can also give herself Deadeye. I talked about what inverse polarity does earlier when I was talking about Dark Lord Eliza, but just to talk about it a bit more, it's actually an extremely useful debuff, especially against the right opponents. Basically anybody that can heal themselves in some capacity is going to have a hard time dealing with inverse polarity. To give a specific example of who inverse polarity would be good against, imagine if you're fighting Black Dahlia and she has the No Time to Die Marquee ability, which gives her a chance to gain a stack of regen whenever she gets hit by a critical hit. Yeah, all those stacks of regen that she's going to get are going to be turned against her if she gets inverse polarity. So inverse polarity is of course, like I said, going to be good against anybody that can heal themselves. As for Deadeye, Deadeye makes it so your attacks ignore the opponent's defense, and your attacks will not trigger the effects of Autoblock, Unflinching, Evasion, or Thorns. Now let's just quickly go through those buffs that I just listed. First we have Autoblock, which makes it so each stack of Autoblock gives you a 10% chance to automatically block the next hit. I already talked about what Unflinching does when I was talking about Reigning Champ, but it is extremely annoying when you're the one that has to deal with it. Then there's Thorns, which reflects 20% of the attacker's physical damage when hit per stack. Then there's Evasion, which prevents damage and hit reactions from the next hit. And with Deadeye, you can ignore all of these annoying buffs. Autoblock, Evasion, and Unflinching all do different things technically, but they can all have a similar impact in that they can basically make it so your opponent can interrupt your combos, which of course gives the opponent an opportunity to counter, and that's never good. When it comes to Thorns, Thorns can be extremely dangerous depending on how much health the opponent has, since they're going to be reflecting damage. So if the opponent has way more health than you do and they have Thorns, there's a chance that you'll die before you can actually finish them off due to damage reflect. But since Psykid can give herself Deadeye, if she has to fight anybody that can provide any of these buffs, she won't have to deal with any of their nonsense. But the thing that makes Psykid so much fun to play is the fact that she is able to hold onto her buffs and keep the opponent's debuffs on indefinitely as long as she's able to bounce the enemy off the wall. And getting a wall bounce with Umbrella honestly isn't too difficult. If you're near the opponent's side of the stage against the wall, you can just throw the opponent to get off a wall bounce. You can also use Tongue Twister, and if you're in overstuffed mode, a dash attack will also bounce the enemy off the wall, so it's pretty easy to hold on to buffs because of this. Umbrella also has some moves that inflict slime, and what slime does is it makes it so the enemy takes damage equal to 2% of their max health each time they gain a buff per stack of slime. With Psykid's ability, you should be able to get multiple stacks of slime on the enemy and just have them on the enemy throughout the fight, which is of course useful, especially against opponents that can give themselves lots of buffs. But yeah, honestly, Psykid's ability to just hang on to any buff that she gets for an indefinite amount of time is so awesome and so much fun. And frankly, I think having somebody that can give themselves Deadeye is going to be helpful in a lot of situations, so I think Psykid would be a good contender for that position if you don't already have somebody that can do that. Alright, next we have Final Fang Valentine. So Final Fang's ability, 1001 Techniques. When the opponent gains a buff, mirror one of their buffs and inflict Curse for 7 seconds. 20% chance on hit to inflict a random debuff for 15 seconds while the opponent is suffering from a debuff. So Final Fang is honestly a lot of fun to play just because it can be really fun to inflict debuffs on the enemy, especially since the debuffs that she inflicts are random, so you can just get all sorts of crazy debuffs on the enemy. She also inflicts Curse on the enemy whenever they gain a buff, which makes it so they can't really stack too many of the same buffs because they'll be cursed. I already used her as an example, but I'm gonna go ahead and use her again. Like I said, if you're up against somebody like Black Dahlia with the No Time to Die Marquis ability, normally whenever you get a critical hit, there's a chance that she would get a stack of regen, but if you were using Final Fang in that situation, if she were to gain a stack of regen, she would get cursed. So while she would still gain that stack of regen, she wouldn't be able to get any more until her curse expires. So in that sense, Final Fang is actually really good against certain opponents that would give themselves lots of buffs. Plus, since she can mirror opponent buffs, that's pretty useful too. I consider that more of a fun bonus to Final Fang, but at the same time, it could be really fun when you mirror something like Unflinching. But yeah, personally, when it comes to Final Fang, I really like to use her against Painwheel, specifically a Painwheel with the Tainted Blood Marquis ability. So Painwheel's Marquis ability, Tainted Blood, makes it so whenever she would get hit by a critical hit, some of that damage is reflected back onto you. The higher the level of the ability, the more damage that's going to get reflected. Tainted Blood is one of the most annoying Marquis abilities in the game, in my opinion, simply because there's just a lot of situations where the enemy is going to have a ton of health, and like I said earlier, if an enemy has a lot of health, there is a chance that you will die from damage reflect before you can actually defeat your opponent. So the reason that I like to use Final Fang against Painwheel is, first of all, because of Valentine's own abilities. So Valentine's character ability Siphon makes it so the damage she inflicts heals the scratch damage that she's taken. For those that don't know, scratch damage is actually that red bar in your health meter. So because of Siphon, you're going to be healing while you're fighting Painwheel, which is of course going to help when dealing with damage reflect. But there's also Valentine's Marquis ability ICU, which makes it so whenever Valentine suffers from a debuff, she gets heavy regen. Heavy regen makes it so you heal 2% of your max health per second. Of course, since you have to suffer a debuff for this to activate, it's not always going to activate, but there's going to be a lot of times where you're just randomly going to get hit by a debuff due to a match modifier or some kind of nonsense. And while you do technically need 2 of the same variant to actually unlock this, there's Valentine's Prestige ability, Reanimator. Upon activation, Reanimator revives all defeated teammates, and Valentine starts to recover health over time, which increases as you increase the level of your Prestige ability, which is pretty much just more healing that's, again, gonna be helpful when dealing with damage reflect. But the reason I like to use Final Fang specifically against Painwheel has a lot to do with the fact that she can inflict Curse. Now keep in mind, this is mostly because of No Mercy. In Parallel Realms No Mercy, there's a match modifier that makes it so whenever the enemy gets a stack of bleed, it gets converted into regen, and because of this, a lot of Valentine's moves that would inflict bleed on the enemy normally would actually just give them regen instead. But since Final Fang can inflict Curse on the enemy whenever they gain a buff, you can actually inflict bleed on the enemy once they have Curse. And if you can inflict bleed on Painwheel, her health is going to be draining over time without you having to actually hit her, meaning you won't have to deal with any damage reflect. When it comes to Final Fang's damage, I find that it's not the highest, though that might have to do more with my build than anything, but in spite of that, she has so many ways to inflict bleed that it doesn't really matter. Even with low damage, as long as you're able to drain the enemy's health with bleed, you should still be able to win the fight within the time limit. But yeah, I do recommend Final Fang Valentine if you're somebody that has trouble dealing with Tainted Blood Painwheel. But also, if you're the type of person that likes to inflict tons of debuffs on the enemy, then I think she could be a fun choice for that as well. Next, we have Hell's Bell Fukua. So Hell's Bell's ability, Demonic Devotion. Well, the opponent's health is above 35%, 15% chance on hit to inflict bleed for 5 seconds, and a random debuff. Every 10 seconds as the active fighter, Fukua grants her teammates Miasma for 15 seconds and evasion. So like Final Fang, Hellspell can inflict a ton of debuffs on the enemy. There is one major difference between them that honestly makes Hellspell kind of a more fun person to inflict debuffs with, and that's the fact that her debuffs don't have timers, with the exception of the additional bleed that she inflicts along with the debuff. So if you're using Hellspell, you're gonna see a ton of different debuffs on the enemy while fighting them, and it is so much fun to watch. The only debuff that you'll consistently see is bleed, since that's the only debuff that you're guaranteed to inflict on the enemy. Though what's kind of funny is since Hellspell actually inflicts random debuffs, there is a chance that you'll inflict a bleed alongside the bleed that you already inflict, So you'll have one bleed that will expire over time, but you'll have another bleed that doesn't have a timer. So yeah, there's not much I have to say about all that, but Hellspell is just so much fun to play with all of the debuffs that she inflicts. She also gives your teammates a stack of evasion and a stack of miasma, which is nice, though personally I never really take advantage of it because I don't tag out very often. But if you're somebody that does like to tag out, then it can definitely be helpful. Again, I don't really have too much to say about Hellspell other than I think she's a really fun character to play. Alright, for my final pick, I'm just gonna be honest, I didn't know who to pick, so I picked Nailbiter Squigly. Now, I wasn't totally sure if I should recommend Nailbiter just because I don't really know if she has any specific uses against characters, and frankly I'm not that good with Squigly, but at the same time she is kind of a fun character to play, and I've already recommended some weirdos in this list, so I figured might as well throw her in there too. Alright, Nailbiter's ability Night Rain. Gain miasma or barrier for 15 seconds each every 0.25 seconds while charging Worm's Tail. These effects are removed when knocked down. While fully charged, evade all attacks when dashing. Successful dash attacks inflict 3 random debuffs, excluding Stun or Doom, for 10 seconds. So Nailbiter's ability is so good, it's extremely easy to get a bunch of stacks of miasma and barrier. I forgot to explain what barrier does earlier. Basically, it absorbs damage. I would just think of it as an extra health bar, since that's basically what it is. As for miasma, it makes it so whenever you're near the opponent, you drain 1% of their health as well as 1% of their blockbuster meter per second. Now, when I say you drain their health and their blockbuster meter, what I really mean is you steal it from them. So you're going to be gaining health back whenever you're near the opponent, and they're going to be losing health. Same with blockbuster meter. Now, that might not sound like a lot, but miasma stacks up to 5 times, so imagine 5 stacks of miasma while near the opponent, you're going to be draining their health pretty quickly. And because you're also going to be draining the opponent's blockbuster meter while you're near them, you're also not going to have to worry about them throwing a blockbuster at you. On top of that, since you're going to be stealing their blockbuster meter like I said, you're also going to be able to throw out blockbusters much quicker. Now for the other part of her ability, and frankly this is where I struggle the most, she can inflict 3 random debuffs whenever she hits the opponent with a dash attack. I sometimes have really bad timing with this and end up hitting the enemy while they're blocking, thus giving them a chance to counter me. So if you're really good with timing, it can be really easy to inflict some debuffs on the opponent. Plus, when she's fully charged, she can actually evade all attacks while she's dashing, which is so awesome to witness. Though as soon as you stop dashing, that evade goes away, so if you do hit the opponent while they're blocking, they're still gonna counter you. One major downside to her barrier and miasma is that once you get knocked down, you lose all stacks of them. So if you're up in the enemy's face and you're just unleashing all these attacks upon them, if they burst you and you don't have unflinching and you get knocked down, you're gonna lose all of your barrier and miasma, and it kind of sucks. But considering how easy it is to get miasma and barrier, I suppose it's a fair trade-off. Now, when it comes to her Marquee ability, I don't actually use Squigly's Marquee ability, so I'm not even going to talk about it, but I will talk about her Prestige ability. So Squigly's Prestige ability, Stay Tombed. Basically, what it does is, once activated, any defeated opponents cannot be revived. Plus, Squigly will gain a dragon charge whenever she's near a dead body every certain amount of seconds depending on the level of the ability. So the whole not being able to revive thing is honestly extremely awesome. The only thing that you have to keep in mind when it comes to that is, once you activate it, it's only the opponents that are defeated at that time that won't be able to revive. So if you defeat 2 opponents and you're on the last opponent, none of those opponents will be able to come back to life if you activate that ability. Though if you only defeat 1 opponent and you activate that ability, once you defeat the next opponent, technically that opponent will still be able to come back to life. And the additional dragon charge over time is pretty nice, so yeah. Now that's all I really have to say about Nailbiter. I definitely recommend her if you like Squigly, because she's honestly a really good one. But if you're not really a fan of Squigly, then I don't know if I'd recommend her, just because she doesn't do anything specifically useful against specific variants. I just think she's a fun character to play. But yeah, that's it for my Fortune's favorite picks. A lot of these picks I genuinely think are really, really useful. Some of them are a bit random, but I still think they're all pretty fun. But I'm very curious what characters that you guys would recommend. I might give more in-depth thoughts about the specific characters that I chose in the future, but for the most part, this is a little bit of a general summary, I guess. But yeah, either way, that's going to be the end of the video. Once again, let me know what you guys think, and let me know who you guys would recommend. But yeah, I'll see you guys again next time.